All right, we are joined here today by two of our fantastic Willamette alums in our career series, Life After Woo. Lindsey, would you like to get us started and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about where you're at right now?
Yeah, so I'm Lindsey. I graduated from Willamette in 2019. I was a psychology and economics double major. When I graduated from Willamette, I started my career in Portland at a economics consulting firm called Evergreen Economics. So we did a lot of renewable energy consulting. There are a lot of other Willamette graduates who also work there and are starting to work there. Um, and I stayed there for about a year and a half doing a lot of data analysis type tasks. I learned a lot of coding using different software like R and Python while I was at Evergreen. And then that kind of led me into my current position at Alaska Airlines. I am a business intelligence analyst and I help out on the operations analytics team. So we basically get a lot of different requests about the operation, airports, customer service, things like that. And we use our data that we collect to help answer those business questions.
That's fantastic. And Beth, how about you?
My name is Beth, and I am a policy manager with Unite America, located in Denver. I graduated in 2016 with a politics major. That was right before they sort of reformatted the major to PPLE, I think. So I was a politics major, and I initially moved to Denver thinking I might go to law school, but presently at Unite America, I do policy research on different election reforms. So we're a nonpartisan political reform organization that's hoping to foster a more functional and representative government. And my specific day-to-day is a lot of policy research on vote by mail, independent redistricting commissions, ranked choice voting, and nonpartisan primaries. Prior to working at Unite America, I was at the National Conference of State Legislatures, which is also a nonpartisan organization for state legislators and legislative staff.
Fantastic. And we can keep going in this order. I'll actually stay with Beth and then go back to Lindsey for this next question. Like, when you think about your current job, is it where you expected to be when you were an undergraduate, or were there other things that you had considered at the time?
Yeah, I had not at all expected to be where I am today. Like I mentioned, I moved to Colorado thinking I might go to law school. So I took some time off after college to study for the LSAT and took the LSAT, and then decided no one's going to pay for this. And I just wasn't truly inspired about really having a passion for like why I wanted to go to law school. So especially in my current role in this sort of nonpartisan election reform space, I feel it's really gained momentum and traction over the past decade or so as states start to implement different policies that reform their election system. So I really feel this whole movement didn't really exist when I was in college, and I didn't really know much about it, but it's really cool. I remember being in the basement of Collins learning about redistricting and thinking like, wow, this is, just such a broad issue with, and now to be able to work and continue to study redistricting reform is a pretty cool thing that I really didn't anticipate doing. So yeah, it's not where I thought I would be, but I think I'm in my dream job. I mean, I wrote my thesis on automatic voter registration, and I still research automatic voter registration. So it's pretty cool.
That's fantastic. What about you, Lindsey? Is this where you thought you'd be?
This is also not where I thought I would be either. I think that at Willamette, I had pretty much set my sights on going to grad school in clinical psychology. So a lot of my experiences during undergrad were related to that or in preparation for that. So I volunteered in a lot of the psychology research labs on campus, worked more on academic journal articles and poster presentations than like focusing more on like coding and going into the workforce. I applied to grad schools in my senior year fall semester and didn't hear back from any of them in time. And that kind of implied that I wasn't accepted into any of them because they usually send out their first notifications around January or so, and then everyone else kind of hears back around April. And so I decided that I was going to pivot my career in my last semester of Willamette and like, I guess kind of like reassess where I could go with the experiences that I had. So I went to the Career Center, worked with Anne, and we kind of decided that potentially jobs that were related to data would be a good fit. And so that's kind of where I refocused my career. And I think it ended up being a good fit for me. After being out of school for a little bit, I realized that there's time to go back to school. And I think that I definitely appreciate the time that I took off. And yeah, I'm very like happy with where my career has ended up. Did not expect this while I was in college, but really happy about it now.
That's great. So this is a Mandy question. So, because students ask this a lot. Okay. So how did you get your first job? And how did you get the job that you have today?
Yeah, for me, so Evergreen Economics has a good connection to Willamette, but I actually applied through the job portal. I don't remember what it was called.
Was it Handshake? Was it
Handshake? Yeah, Handshake. So I applied through Handshake to Evergreen, and I was going through a bunch of different applications, like casting my net widely so that just to like see what would end up from all of those applications. I didn't hear back from Evergreen for about a month after I applied. So I kind of assumed that they had passed over my application, but I got a message through Handshake from somebody who worked there saying that they were interested in having me interview. So I got to interview there around April of my senior year of college. And that's when I found out that there were so many other Willamette people there. So it was kind of easy at the interview to talk about a lot of shared experiences, just because a lot of people also went through those experiences as econ majors. And then into my current job, I was actually looking on LinkedIn casually, thinking that in my current job, I was looking for something more than what I was currently being offered. And I was looking on LinkedIn and I saw a post for a business analyst position at Alaska Airlines. I had actually like always wanted to work in the airline industry, or it was something that was interesting to me, but with no prior experience. And so I applied through the Alaska, like the portal that they have on their website. And I didn't really expect to hear back either, just because I figured that bigger companies get so many applications, but I did get a call from a recruiter and kind of went through the whole interview process there. And I think that both like my time at Willamette, practicing all of those like interview skills, presentations, stuff like that, in addition to the career experience from my first job, helped get my current job.
That's awesome. What about you, Beth? How did you get your first job and how did you get the job well, is the job you have today your first job still?
No, it's my second.
It's your second, okay.
So as I mentioned, I sort of pivoted and decided to not go to law school. So then I was looking for opportunities in the Colorado legislature or related to politics in some capacity. I interned at the Oregon State Capitol while I was at Willamette. So I had some state legislative experience. But I actually found out that NCSL, my first employer, was headquartered in Denver. So I reached out to somebody to set up an informational interview with them just to learn more about the organization, and ended up being a really good conversation and just a helpful connection point when a role opened up for me to apply to. So I think that's one of my biggest pieces of advice is just, especially now in such a virtual Zoom world, kind of asking somebody for an informational interview is a really good tool to connect with somebody, learn more about the organization and if it might be a good fit, and then sort of have a foot in the door, at least a contact, if you ever apply for a role there. So I was at NCSL for about 2.5 years. And actually, Lindsay, it's funny, I found my present job on LinkedIn as well. Just like a random day, scrolling on LinkedIn and saw that this organization was located in Denver. And I loved my role with NCSL. So I wasn't really looking for a new job per se, but their policy platform was really appealing to me. And I sort of was, like I said, I've always been interested in researching elections. So I applied for a role with this organization in a development capacity, and they decided it wasn't really the best fit for me and that I might do better in a research capacity. So they were actually willing to work with me on a role that suited my needs, which was, I think, is pretty unique. But again, it's just a cool, I think it's a unique environment right now where, and that's all to say, like, if you don't see a role with an organization but see a gap that you might be able to fill, I think that people are always interested to learn about like what skills you might bring that they don't already have, because they're a small team. They don't have a research person on their team. So yeah, LinkedIn. It's a great resource.
So now I have to ask the LinkedIn question because I teach our job and internship search strategies course, and I sort of make a joke of this because I will joke with the students about LinkedIn is the social media that you will find the least addictive as an undergrad. It's not like TikTok, you're like scroll through and the videos make you laugh. It's like you have to purposefully cultivate your professional network. Both of you found your second job on LinkedIn. So when you, I guess in terms of advice for cultivating that platform, what would you tell current students or undergraduates about, like, because a lot of them are just getting started on that and they're still trying to figure out who their professional identity is. But if you have used it and the jobs that are showing up there are in your field, you're cultivating it. Like, what advice would you give them about their own LinkedIn networks?
Lindsay, do you want to go first?
Okay. I think for me personally, it was definitely harder because I also looked at LinkedIn for trying to find my first job. And I did apply to a few things through LinkedIn for my first job. I think it's harder when you don't have a certain set of keywords to use. For me now personally, like if I were to look for a third job at this moment, I would look for things related to like data analysis, like business analyst positions, things with basically the word analyst in it would be helpful. I think sometimes filtering by location is helpful because I personally wanted to be up in Seattle and get out of Portland. So I was also focusing my job search more on like things that were opening up in Seattle. So if location is important to you, that's a pretty easy way to filter jobs, in my opinion. And just being open to things that both we're looking for people with like 0 to 1 years of experience and jobs that we're looking for like 1 to 3 years of experience. I think that if you're like the right candidate, they'll be willing to work with you. Like in this role, it required a software that I wasn't too familiar with, but they mentioned that they could work with me on training me in that software, and it wouldn't be a problem. And so I think that like just apply broadly, and it's helpful if there are like alumni connections or your own personal connections at those companies that you can reach out to. I think that's all really helpful in terms of using LinkedIn.
Yeah. I actually deleted Facebook and Instagram and Twitter when I was writing my senior thesis, and I never went back. So
wow.
LinkedIn has become like the not hip social media, but a good way to stay in touch with people professionally. So I really I feel I've leveraged it for the connections. And even just the other day, a fellow peer from my politics cohort lives in Denver, and she reached out to me because she realized that I was connected with somebody else in Denver who she wanted to do an informational interview with. And I set them up in a separate email, and they're
Oh,
going to chat.
wow.
And so I think, like, even when you're not job hunting, it can be an awesome resource to connect peers to other jobs. To stay in touch with colleagues that you might have been close with at an organization, but have no other way of really keeping in touch with them or knowing where they are. But I think really for me, it's been the relationship connections. Though I'll say, I think it's really important for students to develop their profile early on, especially before they go out into the job hunting sphere. But even for internships, like, it's a great thing to do while you're at Willamette. I've hired for several interns at my current organization, and it's something I look at just to see if a student has started to cultivate a profile, and if they've listed their work experience or volunteer experience, especially like if they've volunteered with a campaign or something like that. It's just a good way for employers to track your progress. And LinkedIn's also a little bit more of a fun way to display information than a traditional resume, in ways that it highlights like recent things you've commented on and things like that, what your interests are, right? Like, maybe you wouldn't put all of that on your resume. So I think it's a really awesome tool and sometimes overlooked. Even if you're not looking for a job, you might be able to help a peer down the road. So definitely recommend using it and creating a profile before graduation.
Yeah, no, that's great. I joke that I'm similar to you in a way that, like, I don't really have a lot of other social media, but I really purposefully cultivate. I don't have time, I don't feel like, to do all of them. So I've decided to do, like, I'll do LinkedIn well. The other ones I'll dabble occasionally, but I mostly use them to get information. Like, Instagram is more of like I get information that way, or I follow like Willamette or whatever. But LinkedIn is the one that I like curate and cultivate, and I'm very purposeful about, because there's a few people that log on every day, and I'm in one of those categories. So in relation to your career development, what is something that you wish you would have known as an undergrad about your own career journey?
I'll go first. Lindsey can have some time to think if she wants. I think two things. One, I think that mentors are really important. And one of the reasons I sort of waffled on law school was because I didn't know a successful female professional in environmental law that was telling me, like, hey, this is a good idea. Here's why. Here's my experience in law school. So I think cultivating, it does not have to be somebody that you ask everything of, but just cultivating a relationship with someone professionally that you admire or see yourself, eventually wanting to travel down a similar career path is really important, because they can give you crucial advice about, like, here's how you pay for law school, here's how you do these things, here's how you study for the LSAT. So I think trying to cultivate a mentor early on is really important. And I have one from my former organization that I still keep in touch with and talk to about my current job. And so I think that is something that I wish I would have done earlier. And also, I think that I really sympathize for graduates who are entering a COVID work environment. Because even before the COVID work environment, it can be hard to find a role, especially if you move to a new city and don't know anyone, which I decided to do partially because of school. But I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
You were talking about mentors and the importance of mentors and keeping in touch with someone still today.
Yeah, keeping in touch with mentors.
Entering
I was just going to say, entering the COVID world, it's just sort of a tough job market. And I don't know about you, Lindsey, but I in my first role, I had to apply for a lot of jobs and I had to do a lot of follow-up, and it was not the case that I just moved here and found a job. It took a long time. And so, you know, as Lindsay mentioned, like sometimes you apply for a role and you don't hear back ever. You don't hear back for a month. That's not unusual. And sometimes it's hard to have patience, but I think that patience pays off. And especially when I was leaving a role, I think it's important to have patience and know that, like, if you're very unhappy in a position, it's likely you won't find a job the next week. It takes a long time. So just to have that patience and know that, like, it's a tough job market, but I think in some ways COVID can be used in the reverse, which is to say, like, I'm not ready to move back to Portland, but you know, maybe a organization that is now operating fully on Zoom is willing to hire somebody who works in Denver or Seattle, you know. So I think that it's kind of can be an opportunity for students who might not be able to move across the country or might not want to, but a lot of workplaces are now going to be very flexible in their remote work policies, I think.
What about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Beth said. I think that I also agree that the importance of a mentor figure is very valuable. For me, I did have a sort of mentor figure at my first job. We kind of talked about career growth. And this was somebody who was not my manager, so it was easier to be a little more candid and honest with being right out of college in a new career and trying to figure out where I want to go and if I want to stay at the company or eventually find something else. In my current position, Alaska does offer a mentorship program where you can sign up to be a mentee or a mentor. And I think they also encourage just reaching out to people that you, even if they're not in the same department as you, to learn more about what they're doing. And you can like set up an unofficial mentor-mentee pair there. So I think that those types of relationships are really important in careers. And I think that that's something that I wish I would have known right out of college.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing is, like, for me, I was kind of hesitant to apply to a lot of positions because I felt like I didn't have the qualifications. You know, like if you go to a larger college, you can, I guess, like specialize more in a certain field. Versus if you're at a liberal arts college, the appeal of that is you get like a wider range of knowledge and also like other soft professional skills that you develop, like doing presentations, things like that, critical thinking. And I think that for me, I was focused on what I wish I had versus what I actually had, in a sense. So like, rather than wishing that I had a formal degree in data science or whatever, I think that it's valuable to recognize that there are a lot of skills that you can get at a liberal arts college that you can't get anywhere else. And those perspectives that you bring to the table are important, and not to like just like not discredit what you've done at Willamette just because like it's not like University of Oregon, like a larger school, things like that. I think like that kind of encouragement would have been helpful. And I think I would have applied to a lot more jobs that maybe I didn't fit like the technical requirements on paper, but it still would have been worth a shot because I think like liberal arts students have a lot to offer for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So then the other side of that question, right? So part of it is like, what do you wish you would have known? But and you're kind of getting at this already, but like, what advice would you give at this point?
Yeah. I think for me, I think that your first job should be thought of as a first job and not necessarily a forever job. That was something that I came to terms with as I was doing informal job searching around the time I realized that if I wanted to grow professionally, I should move on. So in that sense, like your first job can be thought of as like a way in to whatever you're interested in, or it could be something that you filter out when you look for something else. And I think that like just making the most of whatever opportunity you have, whether it be like a full-time position or an internship or like a contract position out of college, I think like there's valuable experience in any career, and that it can like things can be applied to whatever you look at next. So I think that's like my biggest piece of advice and what I've learned thinking back.
Yeah, I think that's great. What about you, Beth?
I will just add, I think that's all right. I would just add the power of internships.
Mm.
I mentioned I was at the Capitol for a semester. And in hindsight, I think I almost might have pursued other internships because I had several other jobs throughout. But internships are such a great way to find out if you like something or not. And they're also sort of a lower pressure environment. They're also a shorter period of time. And so in hindsight, I wish I would have worked for other nonprofit or like, pursued an internship maybe with a nonprofit organization or a nonpartisan organization. And I think, as I mentioned, there's a great opportunity now for students to pursue virtual internships if they're home for the summer in a space that they might be interested in. The other thing I'll say is that this sounds like super cliche, but like I think about the things I learned at Willamette, and there are things that I was clearly really interested in learning more about. And I think that's something students should trust. Like, I never got tired of taking politics classes. I think that like your passions and the things that you're interested in are much clearer than I thought they were at the time. Like I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do after college. I don't know what my future is. But if I would have thought a little harder about what I liked learning most about, it's sort of like the easiest clue to like what types of careers you're going to enjoy. And for me, that's like policy research and election reform. And I think that like that's also what makes for a satisfying career is like feeling like you go to work and you learn something every day. So I would just say to undergraduate students, like trust the classes that you love and start thinking about how you can turn things that you love into a career.
That's great. Well, I don't have any more formal questions, but I would certainly just open up the floor for things that if you have things you want to share, a story about it's like people who maybe were influential to you at Willamette or otherwise, or just I guess advice or thoughts that you have for the students.
Yeah, I can go first.
Great.
I think I'm just very thankful for all of the experiences that I've had at Willamette. I think especially my relationships with my professors. I think that's something that's very valuable at Willamette. The appeal of smaller classes, you get to know your professors, your professors get to know you. I've kept in contact with a lot of them after graduating from Willamette. I send emails occasionally to a lot of the professors that I've worked closely with, just to keep them updated on what I'm up to and to hear about how their classes are going. And just to get career advice as well. When I was going through a career transition, I reached out to some of my economics professors and asked for an unbiased third opinion on my current situation and the benefits, the pros and cons of staying versus looking for another job. So I think that relationships that you build with your professors is something that's really important and something that you should keep doing after you graduate. And yeah, that was my main thing. Maybe I'll think of something else, but if Beth has things.
That's great. I think that's really good
Yeah.
advice, right? I think that's great advice.
I totally agree. I feel the same way about the politics professors. I still talk to Professor Ellis, and he was my thesis advisor, and um, so many of I think the politics program just really taught me how to read and write and critically think, and I still think about classes that I took there, and would similarly reach out to professors if I needed advice on grad school or next steps. I think that's really, really good advice. And it's so cool that like Willamette is a small enough community that professors are more than willing, in my experience, to maintain those relationships. And then also just, students, peers, even though I might not have been really close friends with somebody, Lindsey, I'm sure if I came to Seattle, I could message you on LinkedIn and we could go get coffee, like it's
Yeah.
just a small enough community that like graduates I've seen graduates at like 5K runs and things like that. Like it's just a small enough world that you see Willamette alums all over the place. And that's a pretty cool thing. So I'm just really grateful for the community that Willamette provided me, even though I'm kind of far away right now. And yeah, I just think that Willamette has really prepared me well in both the hard and the soft skills in my career, and I'm really grateful that I went to school there. Mainly. So
Well, if in the future a student sees this video, I'm going to guess a good way to get in touch with both of you would be through LinkedIn. Yes, that's fantastic.
perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.